Going. There we go. Okay, good morning. We are holding in chapter 35, page 478 in the lessons in Tanya, the 20 Adar of a single year. So remember where we're holding a bit. It's been a while. We're talking about the importance of why a person was created, why a person was placed in this world, and that is to bring the Shekhinah, that the Shekhinah should rest within the person. And when is that possible? Specifically, if you're doing a mitzvah, right? We brought the example of the candle where you have the wick, the fuel, and the fire. And in order for the fire to hold on to the wick, you need fuel. What's the property that you're looking for in fuel? Something that can be entirely consumed, right? Something that is entirely consumable. I don't know if you yeah, did I tell you the story of the miser they went to get tzedakah from, and he gave a little rusty coin. There's a story of an orphan and two orphans that were getting married, and obviously this was a big tzedakah case. But it came time for the and they had connections to the Hasidic rabbis of the time, and so the Alter Rebbe came to this wedding. Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev was there, some of the great Hasidic masters of the time, and they needed to fundraise a few more, some money for the wedding. So they went around, and so Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev asked Alter Rebbe if he'd go around collecting money with him. So Alter Rebbe said, "Sure, on condition that I decide where we go." Anyhow, so they get a list of the people in town to go to, and on the list there is a very wealthy person, they're told, but he's a miser. He doesn't give anything but a copper coin, rusty copper coin. Don't even bother going to him. But because the condition was the Alter Rebbe decides who they go to, Alter Rebbe said, "We're starting with him, the first person." So they go to his house, they knock on his door, and sure enough, he welcomes them in. They tell him the cause. He goes over in his study, he goes over to the safe, he opens it up, and he pulls out a rusty copper coin, and he hands it to the Alter Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe, a smile comes onto his face, and he thanks him and blesses him for the mitzvah of tzedakah, and he turns around to leave. As he turns around, the miser says, wait a second. He goes back to his safe, and he takes out a bill, 100 ruble. So Alter Rebbe again showers him with blessings and smile, and so he turns around and he gives him more until he asks him, how much did you say was for the wedding? And he paid for the whole wedding. As the Alter Rebbe thanked him again, blessed him, and then was turned around to leave. As the Alter Rebbe was about to leave, he asked Alter Rebbe if he would like to hear his story. Obviously, everyone with the Alter Rebbe that was local to the town was shocked. The Alter Rebbe made as if he didn't understand what was going on. He was just, but meanwhile, everyone else is like, he knows. Anyhow, so he tells him like this, that when he grew up a poor child, and he started to go out to work as a teenager, whatever it was, and he made money. And he was walking home from work one day. He didn't have much money on him. All he had was a copper coin. Someone stopped him in the street for a tzedakah, and so he stuck his hands in his pocket. He took out everything he had, which was a copper coin, and he gave it to him. And the guy threw it back at him, and he said, "What are you embarrassed to give? I need a meal. This won't cover anything. How do you?" And that really affected him, because here he was working very hard, making a little bit of money. He had no cash on him. He gave this poor man everything he had, and this type of ungratefulness and of just hit him the wrong way. And he made a resolution that until someone takes this copper coin from him, he's not going to give any more tzedakah. And the problem was he made a promise that he felt bad about afterwards because, after a few people, he tried giving this copper coin to and no one wanted it. He grew a name in town. People stopped asking him. He really wanted to give tzedakah. He was a recipient of tzedakah as a child. He wanted to give, but he had made a promise that he's not giving until someone collects it. And for years, he became a very wealthy person. He was known all over town as a miser because he didn't give anything, but he was just waiting for someone to recognize and appreciate his sacrifice, which at the time was a major sacrifice. It was a copper coin, but it was a major sacrifice. And Alter Rebbe explained later that this miser's heart, from a spiritual perspective, was sort of closed off. Why? Because he never did the mitzvah, the Shekhinah never rested there. It became like a dark place. And when he was able to get himself to do the mitzvah, because Alter Rebbe accepted the coin, he finally did a mitzvah, the Shekhinah was able to rest there, and then it became much easier for his heart to open up and for everything to come flowing out. Okay, we're about to finish the chapter. We want to address one more issue here. And that is, when we began this chapter, we asked a number of questions. One of the questions we asked was why the person was created, why the world was created, but why did Hashem create a Beinani? Remember, a Beinani is not someone who will ever change his innards. He may change his behavior. He may change his thought patterns, his speech patterns. He may be more in control of himself, but as a person, he will never stop being an alcoholic. He will never stop wanting to commit the sin, to do whatever it is tempts him. He will never get rid of that urge. So why, so how did Alter Rebbe answer that question? Alter Rebbe answered, what's the purpose of creating a Beinani? Alter Rebbe said, we have to comfort them doubly, that as long as they do mitzvahs, they will draw down the Shekhinah, even if they can't change who they are. As long as they do the mitzvahs, they'll be able to bring down the Shekhinah. Specifically, physical mitzvahs. In other words, not just spirit, the love of God and faith and study of Torah, but physical mitzvahs. Now, what's the question? We just got finished explaining that where does the Shekhinah rest? Somewhere that is able to be consumed within the Shekhinah, like the oil, like fuel for a fire. In other words, something that has no independent existence, that feels totally consumed and subsumed within God. So a tzaddik, I can understand. Tzaddik is able to rise to the level that he doesn't have an animal soul. His animal soul is converted to a second godly soul. So now he's totally one with God. But the Beinani, he will never get rid of his animal soul. In other words, he will always have a voice in his head that separates him from God, not separates him to the point of action because he's in control. He doesn't listen. But inside, he's not one with God. He has foreign thoughts. He has foreign desires. So how could the Shekhinah rest in the Beinani? Because the Beinani is an independent existence, and the Shekhinah only rests, right? The fire, the flame only rests where there's something that's consumable. The Beinani isn't consumable. The Beinani has a healthy animal soul. Yeah. So in order to answer this question, Alter Rebbe is going to introduce us to a concept. It's not a earth-shattering concept, but it's a concept that we don't think about necessarily. You all know the term exile. Okay? In Hebrew, galut. We use this term at least 3 times a day to speak about the fact that we are not autonomously in Israel with the ability to perform all the commandments. We are in exile. We don't see God. We don't experience God the way it should be. There is another entity that's in exile together with the Jews, And this is known and referred to in Kabbalah and in Hasidus as Galut HaShechina, the Galut of the Shechina. That just like the Jews are in Galut, in exile, God himself is, so to speak, in exile. And God, in the prophets, is full of it. That God tells the prophets all the time that when the Jews are suffering, I'm suffering too. When you think about it, a parent, when the children are suffering, when the children are sick, when the children are in timeout or being punished, the parents suffer. The parents are pained, are in pain when the child's in pain. There was a certain girl, a young woman in Crown Heights that had adolescence issues, things that affected her faith in God and her practice and her attitude in school, etc. And there was a young rabbi at the time that was asked by the Rebbe's secretary to be in touch with this girl, try to have an influence on her. And he got her to write letters to the Rebbe, and whenever she wrote a letter, she would immediately get a response, which was unheard of. Most people, it could take weeks to months, and some people, most Chabad people never got responses to the letters. It was just, but she got a response right away. One time, the Rebbe responded to a sticky situation she was in, and the Rebbe said, I feel your pain. And she responded, she wrote back, I don't believe you. So this rabbi, obviously, yes, he sends a chutzpah, but that was what she felt. So the Rebbe, right away, there was a response came out. The Rebbe wrote that, God willing, one day she will grow up and get married and have children. And the nature is that when a child is a few months old, they start teething. And she will see that as a mother, when the child is teething, she will feel the child's pain. And the Rebbe wrote, Kach ani margish tzara. This is how I feel your pain. Well, in Hebrew, you write in third person. This is how I feel her pain. In other words, you could say you don't believe me, and you won't know until you one day feel someone else's pain. Then you'll see it's possible for a different person to feel your pain. So Hashem tells us that when we are in pain, we are in exile, he's in exile. These are known concepts, that the Jews are in exile and God's in exile. Now, I was going to introduce us to a new concept now, and that is that Klippa is in exile. What does it mean, Klippa is in exile? Usually, what do we want to do with Klippa? What do we want to do with anything anti-God? What would we like to do with anti-God? Get rid of it. We'd like to do that. But now that we've learned a little Tanya, who is capable of getting rid of it? The tzaddik. How many tzaddikim are there? Most of us are not tzaddikim. So now we have to figure out a new way of dealing with anti-godliness. How do we deal with anti-godliness? We put it into exile. What does that mean? We don't give it a voice. We focus our thought, speech, and action on godliness, on Torah and mitzvahs, the Beinani. And what happens to the animal soul when the Beinani is focused on what he's supposed to be focused on? The term we used in chapter 12 was, I think, it goes to sleep. Like during prayer, it's sleeping. What does it mean it's sleeping? In other words, it's an exile. No one's listening to it. It's caged up. Now, any second, it could wake up and tear the whole thing down. That's why you have to constantly be vigilant. But at the end of the day, if you focus your body and your godly soul to doing mitzvahs, to studying Torah, at this moment, your godly soul is not in exile. Your godly soul is now revealed. So what's in exile? The animal soul. When the animal soul is in exile, then the Shekhinah can rest on the person. Because now the person is totally devoted to God. Sure, it's not guaranteed. It's not long-term necessarily, because at any moment, since he still has the animal soul, at any moment it could be reawakened. But because in this moment it is sleeping, therefore he's able to to be a receptacle, a vessel for the flame, the godly light. We have a few examples of these. For example, when the Jewish people left Egypt, it says none of the dogs barked. But it doesn't say they didn't become they stopped being dogs. It's just they didn't use they didn't scare the Jew. They didn't protest. These were guard dogs. These were Egypt was a fortress, was a prison, and the dogs didn't make a move. But it doesn't say they didn't become dogs. They weren't dogs anymore, right? And it says also by Mordecai, Haman, when Haman led Mordecai through the streets on the horse, right? Because to repayment from the king. At that time, Haman was still planning on killing Mordecai the next day. He was still building his gallows, right? So even though he was riding Mordecai through the streets, the term that's used is he still hated Mordecai. He wasn't not Haman anymore. Even though if you looked at it from the outside, what did you see? Who was on top? Mordecai. And he was leading him. In other words, he was like his servant. Yeah, but still he hated Mordecai. Right? So here we see the contrast. You could express one thing while being something else. So just like the Beinoni, even though he has an animal soul, he could still be devoted to God. Same thing, the Shekhinah can rest in him because in those moments when he's totally in his godly state, the Klippa is in exile. Okay, so let's see this inside. Top page 478. Although the substance and essence of the animal soul is in his heart, in other words, it's evil midot, it's evil emotional character, have still not been absorbed into holiness. Wait, what do you have? It's volume 1?
Yeah.
No problem.
Been a while, but it's a few less.
That's why we have access.
Yeah, right. I thought this, I was missing a few things. Okay, where are we at?
Page 478. We're at the end of chapter 35.
Yeah.
Although the substance and essence of the animal soul in his heart, in other words, it's evil midot, it's evil emotional character, have still not been absorbed into holiness. Yet because they, the evil midot, are subjugated to holiness, and against their will they say Amen, agreeing and acceding to the performance of the mitzvot. Right, let me stop here. I know this is not perhaps usual, the usual type of commentary I give, but I'd like to dwell here a minute on this paragraph. It says, yet because they are subjugated to holiness and against their will, they say Amen. And then he says agreeing and exceeding. So 3 different terminologies. There's against their will, and then there's agreeing. Once someone agrees, you don't necessarily call it against their will, but originally it was, they had to agree to it. And exceeding means they don't just agree, they want to do it now, yeah? But again, we're all starting from the point that it was against their will. So there's a commentary on Tanya written by my great-grandfather, and he explains these three expressions here as 3 different ways that a person can affect their animal soul. Let's say a person struggles with, let's say Shabbos, yeah? It's of Shabbos. So one way to get yourself to convince your animal soul or to convince someone else to keep Shabbos is by going through the benefits of Shabbos. Yeah, you'll get to spend time with your family. You'll have a rest from the chaos of the week. It'll do good for you both in your personal life, in your family life, in your spiritual life, and everything. And a person may be persuaded with that, that argument to keep Shabbos. Then there's another method of doing this, and that is by instilling a little fear, saying you better keep you want to keep Shabbos, because if you don't, who knows what God has in store for people that don't keep Shabbos? Yeah, you want to be on God's good graces. You want to get blessings. Keep Shabbos. Let's say a person is persuaded to keep Shabbos. Is he excited to do it? He agrees to do it. He's happy, but is he excited? Not like the first person who's excited to spend time to see the benefits Shabbos will bring him. Yeah. And then there's a third way of getting someone to keep Shabbos, and that's the extreme. That's by literally forcing him to. Now, if you literally lock them up in a room, give them no technology and no fire, they're incapable of desecrating the Shabbos. Did they keep Shabbos? Yeah. Did they agree to it? No. Do they want to? Not really. It's against their will, right? So here we have these three in the other order. First, you have someone, in other words, this is not from one person to another person. This is the person trying to force his own animal soul to. So here you have the first way is that because they are subjugated to holiness against their will, they say Amen. In other words, your godly soul is so powerful, it can force the animal soul to say Amen. Or you can even get it to agree. Or you can even go further. You've managed to get it to concede, to accede to the performance of the mitzvot. In other words, now he wants to do it, like in the first case. How did you manage to get your animal soul to go along with you to keep Shabbos? Through the strengthening of the divine soul and the brain, which masters the heart. Yes, so you're not like the tzaddik that you converted the animal soul. The animal soul is still the animal soul, but you used your brain to persuade, convince, or even force the animal soul to keep Shabbos. So then, and the evil midot are at such time. In other words, when one exercises the natural mastery of the brain over heart by contemplating God's greatness. So when you're doing that, the animal soul is in a state of exile and sleep. In other words, it's impotent, as mentioned above in chapter 12. Therefore, this incorrigible nature of the animal soul's evil midot does not prevent the Shekhinah from resting on one's body at this time. Since at this time the animal soul is not sort of present, right? It's not revealed, so the Shekhinah can rest there. This resting of the Shekhinah means, what does it mean, the resting of the Shekhinah? That the power of the animal soul clothed in the act that constitutes the mitzvah, for example, the power in the hand donning tefillin, is actually absorbed into the divine light and merges with it in perfect unity. In other words, right now when the animal soul is sleeping, is in galut, the Shekhinah merges with perfect unity with the body, with the physical body of the Beinoni, of the person who's doing the mitzvah. Thereby, one draws down a ray of the light wherein the particular power has been absorbed upon the totality of the animal soul throughout the body and upon the entire body as well. However, the animal soul is still not on God's side, so to speak. So this ray of divine light illuminates one's animal soul and his body in a manner of encompassing from above, surrounding them from head to foot. So it doesn't penetrate them. It doesn't, the animal soul is not internalizing the ray of light, but the ray of light at this moment is encompassing it, surrounds it. This explains the expression appearing in the passage from the Zohar quoted at the beginning of this chapter, when we said about the candle on the head. It says, the Shekhinah rests upon his head, specifically upon, on top of. In other words, encompassing him from above. So it's not in him, it's on top of him. And in a similar vein, the expression upon every assembly of 10 Jews, the divine presence rests, means that the light of the divine presence does not permeate them, but illuminates them from above. It says if one person studies Torah, or 3 people study Torah, the Shekhinah is present within them. But if 10 people are present, the Shekhinah is there. Now, if they're studying Torah or doing a mitzvah, then the Shekhinah can penetrate them. But if they're not, if they're just sitting there, so even though the Shekhinah is present, it's not affecting them. They're not behaving as such. When the Alter Rebbe first went, he was very young when he got married, and started. At the time he was bar mitzvah. When he was 13, he was already lecturing in the shuls, and the rabbis and scholars of the time were blown away by his genius. And when he was 15, I think he got married. For 15, I think he was married. And then a few years later, he went to seek out someone to study Torah from. I mean, in his area, he was already the top of the chain. So there were 2 places he was considering to go. He heard he was either going to go to Vilna or to Mezrich, to the Maggid of Mezrich. In Vilna, they would teach Torah study, and in Mezrich here, they teach davening, praying. So he thought to himself, he said, studying, I know a little bit how to do. Praying, I'm not sure. I mean, he prayed every day, but what does it mean to study prayer? So he decided he's going to go to Mizrich, to the Maggid, which is the Baal Shem Tov's successor. So he came to Mizrich, and at first it didn't click. He was about to leave. Something happened and he returned. But one time when he was leaving, so the Maggid's son he was referred to as Avraham the Malach, the angel, because he was very removed from him and physicality didn't go together. And he was a person he had to eat and whatever, but he really was like more angelic type. And he was Alter Rebbe's study partner. So when he was going to escort Alter Rebbe back home, so as he left, he told Alter Rebbe, you should hit the horses until they become oisferd, until they're not horses anymore. It doesn't mean physically to hit them, otherwise how are you going to get home? It means he was teaching himself. There's another version of the story that he said until they should know their horses or recognize their horses. The Rebbe once spoke about this story. What exactly does the story mean? What was he telling him? What was the lesson? It could be he was telling him the difference between a tzaddik and a beinoni. In other words, that a person has a body, a person has an animal soul, and there are two types of people. There's a tzaddik that trains his body to not be a body. Well, it's a body, but it's not the body of the animal soul. It's the body of a godly soul. And he trains his animal soul, his animal's horse, that it shouldn't be a horse anymore. It should turn into a godly soul. But then there are other people that can't do that. But we can at least remind our animal soul, hey, you're the animal soul, okay? You have an opinion. I'd love to hear it someday, but right now I have busier things to do. I don't have time for you. To remember, this is the animal soul. This is not who I am. This is not who I want to be. And therefore, although the voice will always remain, to put it in its place, to recognize its position. There's another Hasidic saying along these lines. Chassidim used to, in general, one of the major, I would say the revolution the Baal Shem Tov made with Hasidic philosophy, although there are many things that result from this, is the concept of hashgacha pratit, individual divine providence. In other words, that everything that happens is by design, which means, taken to its logical conclusion, if I meet someone in the street and they tell me something, God wanted me to hear that. If I'm driving down the street and I see, sometimes you'll have like a bird fly right past your car. But God wanted me to experience that. Everything that happens to us, everything that we hear, see, or notice, God wanted me to hear, see, or notice that. You know how I know? Because there are billions of other things I could have noticed at that time and I didn't. If that's the case, if this is true, if the Baal Shem Tov's premise is true, so then literally anything you encounter in life, you could learn, can be used as a tool. You can learn something from it to enhance your divine service because there's a reason you saw it. It may be to teach you something. It may be to help you in some way, maybe to improve something. So when you study Hasidus, what you encounter a lot is people taking their day-to-day things they experience in their day-to-day lives and showing how there's a message here that can be gleaned from it for divine service. One of the practices that Hasidim had was to travel to the Rebbe. Back in the day, you went once a year, once every other year, depending on how far you lived and how wealthy you were, if you can hire a horse and wagon or if you had to walk. But in general, Hasidim preferred walking. Even when there were horses and buggies, they would walk at least as long as possible. Because when you're going to the temple, you're going to the Rebbe, you walk. You want to exert energy doing it. So one time there was a chassid, he was traveling to the Rebbe in a horse and buggy. He said like this: when a chassid goes to the Rebbe, there are actually three people going to the Rebbe. There's the horse, there's the wagon and the wagon driver, and then there's the chassid sitting inside. What's the horse doing traveling to the Rebbe? What's it thinking when it's traveling to the Rebbe?
There's one job just to pull the cart.
Yeah, but what's it thinking about? It's not thinking about its job. What's it thinking about?
Ooh.
It's thinking about the food it's going to get when it finishes its job. That's what it's thinking about. Reward.
Yeah, sure.
But you're right. It's focused on doing its job because it wants. What's the wagon driver thinking about?
Money.
The same thing. The vodka at the end or the money at the end. That's what it's thinking about. So the Chassid said, just because the horse is thinking about hay and the wagon driver is thinking about vodka, does that mean that the angels, the Chassidim are talking about, aren't angels? In other words, when a person is engaged in a mitzvah and studying Torah, just because he has an animal soul that lives inside of him, does that mean that now anything he does is animalistic? Not necessarily. Now, you could sit in a wagon traveling to the Rebbe and be thinking purely animalistic things. But when you're not, when you're thinking godly things, does that mean the things you're talking about and thinking about aren't godly because there's a horse here that's thinking about horse things? Obviously not. So the same thing here. Although it's true, the Beinoni will never get rid of the animal soul or convert the animal soul, that doesn't mean the Beinoni isn't capable of subjugating the animal soul to the point, to the extent that his godly soul reigns supreme now. And at this moment, he is a receptacle to God. Okay, one last note here at the end of the chapter. So it turns out that let's just for argument's sake, let's use ourselves as examples. It turns out we have 4 people sitting here. Let's assume we're all Beinanim. Beinanim, in other words, we're all strugglers. We all want to do the right thing, so we're not Rishayim. We're not just flat out don't care. We're not Tzaddikim. In other words, we haven't perfected ourselves. We're strugglers. We want to do the right thing, and we struggle with it. But the way I overcome the struggle, or the way I deal with the struggle, is going to be very different than the way you 3 deal with it. And the way each one of you deal with it is going to be very different than the way the rest of us deal with it, right? And we may focus on different mitzvahs or doing mitzvahs in different ways. So it turns out that the Shekhinah that rests in me might be a very different Shekhinah than the one that rests in you. Because you might be doing this mitzvah, I might be doing it different. And even within me, if I'm doing a mitzvah with my hand, putting on tefillin, the Shekhinah is in my hand. It looks like a very different Shekhinah than the Shekhinah will rest in my intestines when I eat kosher. So how many Shekhinahs are there? This is like the question in the Talmud that an apostate asked Rabbi Gamliel. Says that every place where there are 10 Jews, like we mentioned before, the Shekhinah rests there. He said, how many Shekhinahs do you have? How does that work? No. So what's the answer?
It's only one Shekhinah, but maybe it's differentiated at that time.
That would also be a problem because we know, we studied it earlier in Tanya, that Hashem says, I am Hashem, I don't change. I'm the same Hashem before the world was created and after. God doesn't change. We can't affect change within God. God is unchangeable because if he's perfect, you can't change perfection. Because then either he wasn't perfect and you perfected him, or you made him imperfect. So there are 2 common metaphors that are brought to bring this out. How many homes? Well, let's talk about right here. There's 2 buildings, yeah, home and the shul. This shul is lit up by the sun. The home is also lit up by the sun. How many suns are there? It's the one sun. So just because the Shekhinah is in me, the Shekhinah is in you, and the Shekhinah is in Timbuktu, doesn't mean there's 3 Shekhinahs. Shekhinah is everywhere. The question is, where do we let him into? So when I decide I'm going to close the window, does that mean now my Shekhinah died? No. I just didn't let the Shekhinah into me or into my room. When I opened the window, I didn't create a new Shekhinah. I just let the Shekhinah in. That's one thing. But then there's another thing. because the Shekhinah, the way it is by me, might be actually look different than the way it does by you. Or the way it looks like when it's in my hand may look different than the way it looks like it when it's in my head. So then you can have the Shekhinah even in the same room. Let's say we have a room here. Here, all the windows are the same. But let's say in your house, you might have one window that has blinds, one window that has curtains, one window that has room darkening curtains. And now you have one room, the same Shekhinah shining in, but in three parts of the room, you may have three different Shekhinahs. Because in one part of the room it might be dark because you have room darkening shades. The next part of the room might be a little darker, not as dark, but there's curtains, it's darker. And then you have the little blinds that barely block any of the light. But it's the same Shekhinah, and yet in the inside it looks totally different. So when we just have let the sun in here may look like the same sun in there, but it's not two suns, it's the same sun. But let's say the sun in here looks very different than the sun in there. That's because I may have put something up to block the sun's light from coming in or to change. Like you put water in a glass. So if you have different color glasses, you take a bottle of water and you pour it in 10 different color glasses, we have different color water. It's the same water, right? But your vision of it, your perception of it changes. So when I let the Shekhinah in 100%, if my animal soul is 100% in jail, the Shekhinah comes in shining bright. Let's say 10 minutes later, my animal soul starts to get his voice back in, but I'm still forcing myself. Now the Shekhinah may be at 90%. It's still the same Shekhinah. It's just the question is how much of a partition have I put up? How much of a block have I put up? What type of glasses am I wearing? Am I wearing sunglasses? Am I wearing colored glasses? What am I wearing? But the Shekhinah is the same.
It's a different point of view.
It's
the same, but if you're looking from it from the outside to the inside.
Correct.
That's what I'm trying to make this
Yes.
comparison here.
Yep.
And so where relation to that, how it appears, even though, like you say, it's the same Shekhinah, but if we're looking at it, and it might appear, from behind a tree or something, and like you say, you're using the analogy of the window, which I know that analogy. But yeah, from a different point of view, but it's really all the same.
It's all the same. The only reason there might be changes between my vision and your vision, or even within my vision itself in one scenario and a different scenario, the changes are all in me. None of those changes are in the light of the sun. All of those changes are in me.
How it affects you.
But not even, not, it's not how the light affects, how I become, how I see the light, Part of it's because is the way I'm affected by what I did in my life. But that's okay. Let's see here. Page 481. None of these various forms in which the light of the Shekhinah is manifested, meaning the ways in which the Ein Sof light is revealed, can be construed as a change in himself or as a plurality. Chas v'sholom, right? We can't say that all of these differences means that now there's a difference in God himself or that God changes. As we find in the Tractate Sanhedrin, where it is recorded that a certain heretic said to Rabbi Gamliel, "You say that the Shekhinah rests on every assembly of 10. How many Shekhinahs have you?" And Rabbi Gamliel replied with an analogy of the sun's light, which enters through many windows, etc. And the intelligent will understand. And he says here, and as Hasidim would add, and the devout will perceive. In other words, the Beinani, although he has the animal soul, when he's doing the mitzvah, the Shekhinah rests on his body or on the parts of his body that are doing the mitzvah. And he still remains a Beinani. It doesn't get rid of the animal soul, just like the sun. When you put down the curtain, the sun, you didn't get rid of the sun. But when you open the curtain and you let the sun in, you didn't get rid of any type of negative forces that might be in the room. But they're not powerful now. They have no power to them. because they're drowned out by the light that's there, and by your effort to allow the light in, by opening the window, by doing the mitzvah, by silencing and exiling the kleep of the animal soul. There's an interesting story that the effect the Shekhinah has on the physical body. There's in New York airport, in JFK airport, there's a booth, a Chabad booth, where they put on tefillin, do other mitzvahs there. Chabad booth in the airport, like a permanent counter there. And so there's a story of a Jew that came over to the booth and he asked that they fill him up a cup of coffee like for Havdalah. In other words, that it should be overflowing. So he's in his mid to late 80s, and he asks such a request. You do what he asks, then you wait to find out why. So they fill him up a cup. He picks it up in his hand like you pick up a cup for Kiddush, and he shows them, he tells them to notice how his hands aren't shaking. He's getting up there in age. He's holding an overflowing cup and nothing's spilling out. He said, he's asked a bunch of Chabad people, do you want to know why? Of course they want to know why. What's the story? So he said that I think it was the Lower East Side, the Upper East Side, somewhere on the East Side, where there was a large Jewish, or maybe the West Side, I think it was the East Side. There was a large Jewish community once upon a time, many shuls. And as the years went on, the Jewish community got smaller and smaller, so they started closing down the shuls. And there was one shul where the mikveh was the only mikveh left in the whole area. And although there weren't many Jews there, the mikveh lady would come every night, even though the neighbor got dangerous. She'd come every night and open the mikveh. Not every night did people come, but she at least made sure the mikveh was open every night. It got so bad in the neighborhood, and the shul really wasn't used so much that the shul decided they're going to sell the shul. But now the mikveh is in danger. But this lady comes every night to open the mikveh. They can't get rid of it. They can't sell it. So one day, whoever owned the shul, or whoever was trying to change things, put a lock on the mikveh, so she shouldn't be able to come. Shouldn't be able to open it. And like this, slowly people will start finding other places, and then they'll be able to sell it. So she calls the rabbi. What do I do? So the rabbi came down there, brought some, like a lock clipper, clipped the lock, and that showed the people, whoever thought they were in charge, they shouldn't play around. And that's it. The mikveh continued being used. I don't know for how much longer, but for a while, after a while, the mikveh lady told the rabbi that at the time she had spoken to the Rebbe about what was happening. The Rebbe had encouraged her to go every day. That's why she did it. So when the lock was placed, she had notified the Rebbe, and afterwards she told the Rebbe what the rabbi did to break the lock. So the Rebbe said that the hands that perform such a mitzvah should be blessed. So he wasn't the Chabad person. He turns to the people standing by the booth. He's like, you see these hands, you see the blessing. But his point was to say that Rebbe's blessing. But Chassidus teaches us that it's the mitzvah that affects that has that effect on the physical body. That's why when people return to great Torah leaders throughout the generations for help, whether it's health issues or other things, many times they would give them suggestions of doing mitzvahs that affected those parts of the bodies. If someone, for example, was sick, to make sure they eat kosher. Someone couldn't have children or had a hard time having children, to go to the mikveh to keep the laws of family purity. Yeah, to check the mezuzah if they were having financial issues, or other issues, to give tzedakah if financial issues or other things like that. Because the mitzvahs are the tool that we have, the physical tool that we have to allow the godly light, the fire, to connect to our body. Right, the body is the candle. The wax, the wick, the wick. How do we get the light to stick to the wick? By doing mitzvahs. Because by doing Torah, you're not consuming yourself. On the contrary, in order to learn Torah, you have to be something. You have to understand it. You have to innovate in Torah. You can't nullify yourself when studying Torah. Try doing it, you're not going to be able to study anything. But when you do a mitzvah, you're nullifying your own desires. Right now, I'd rather sit and play a game or watch a show or go out and do something. And now I'm doing a mitzvah. You're nullifying your own desire, your own will, your own actions to do what God wants. Yeah, so this answers, so to speak, what we've asked at the beginning of the chapter. Yeah, why the person is here, what we're trying to accomplish. What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to bring the Shekhinah here. We're trying to connect the Shekhinah to our bodies. This is what God created us for. This is why we're here. However, we still don't know why. Why did God do that? Why not suffice with the neshama? Why not have a world of, why create why do we need to bring the Shekhinah into the lowest part? Why do we need to connect the Shekhinah to the body? This is what we're going to start in chapter 36. Should we begin or should we wait till next week to begin? Only a few minutes. Do we have any questions or any topics for discussion that need to be addressed? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So you know what? Let me